Welcome to our daily devotions. We're so glad you joined us today, and we have been exploring a subject that I call the hard sayings of Jesus. Now, if you missed any of these, you might wonder, well, what is a hard saying of Jesus? What does that mean? It would be a saying that Jesus actually said to the people that were around at the time, that if you were sitting there with your friend and you heard it, you would look at your friend and go, no, he didn't. You would say that right to their face. And you'd be so shocked because some of the things that Jesus said, believe it or not, were so revolutionary and just as challenging. So today, we're going to look at one of the things that Jesus said, and that is that you are to suffer with Jesus. That you are to suffer with Jesus. I don't like this one. Because in a sense, it's truthful, but also in a sense, it's not something that you want to necessarily talk about on a regular basis. But I think if you can grab on to how important this is, it will prepare you for the trials that you might be facing or something that you have not gone through yet. You'll remember it. And sometimes when you go through certain things, God will call His word into your memory. This is one of those instances. Now, let me give you the scene for a moment. The disciples are talking to Jesus, and there was a bit of arrogance at times with the disciples because they knew that Jesus was this awesome, religious figure. They knew that He was supernatural, and they really felt privileged that they were on the inner circle, as obviously most of you would feel as well. So at times, there were these discussions about, well, who's going to be the greatest? Who's going to do this in heaven? Am I going to be able to sit at your right side? Who's going to sit at your right side? And it usually came from Peter, all right? Now, this is a response where Jesus talks to them about their desire to always follow Him. Let's take a look at what Jesus says here. In Mark chapter 10, verse 39, it says, they said to Him, we are able to follow you. Remember, He's talking about following Him. And Jesus said to them, the cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. Okay, it sounds a little cryptic. It sounds a little weird, but it's super easy to understand when you think about what He's talking about. What He's talking about is the suffering that He is going to experience at the cross. The suffering that He is going to endure at the cross. He tells them that they're going to identify with that suffering. Essentially, all Christians that follow Jesus will suffer. Now, let me stop you for a moment, what you're thinking. You're like, okay, well, what do you mean? So you mean I'm going to automatically have this horrible life and have these horrible things happen to me because I'm following Jesus? I'm not saying that it's just because you're following Jesus. In fact, the scriptures teach that the same rain that falls on the sinners also falls on the saints. So everyone goes through trouble. But what I believe is most important to remember is that Christians are not exempt from trouble. We are not exempt from trouble. But what we get in the midst of trouble is one thing that this world doesn't have, and that is hope beyond this world. You see, He's talking about going, to the cross. We talked earlier on about picking up your cross, denying yourself, and following Him. And the idea of the crucifixion is a horrible, unbelievable, disfiguring, gruesome, torturous death. And that's a horrible way to entice someone to follow you. But when you realize that at the end of the road of crucifixion is resurrection, well, the pain of the crucifixion and the agony of the torment just melts away. And I mean that. It melts away. That's why it's so important to remember when you're going through trials that Jesus tells us that when we suffer, we identify with Him, that we become more like Him. And it's showing that we are able to partake of the same cup that He partook of, that we are able to be baptized and identified with our Savior in suffering. And some of us, we don't really understand suffering. Some of us, we understand suffering all too well. But all of us, wherever we are in the spectrum of trials, have the opportunity to say that my Savior suffered more for me than I will ever suffer in this world. And because of His suffering, I look forward to a day when He will wipe away every tear, when He will give us the right perspective on everything that we had ever experienced, and that we can look at our future as being as perfect as the God that gave us that future as a gift.